Good afternoon. Welcome back to DougPagittRadio. Shortly after 1 p.m. here in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, broadcasting on AM 950 and DougPagittRadio.com. If you want to follow along online, watch the show, chat with the guests or the hosts or even the radio engineer. Or you want to follow up on any of the conversation that you hear here. If you want to connect with Shelley Paget, natural health coach who was just on, or if you want to chat about health care with our guest, Scott Morris. We will put the link up so you can stay in touch with Scott. Scott is calling us from Memphis, Tennessee. There, Scott is the director of the Church Health Center and has written a book called Health Care You Can Live With. Scott, so glad to have you on the show. Thanks for being on this afternoon.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Now, I think your book is interesting for so many reasons. One, this is religious radio that's not quite right, also referred to around here as your little afternoon delight. But you are a seminary graduate as well as a medical doctor. Is that right?
That's right. I went to seminary and then I went to medical school. I spend most of my time playing doctor, but I think of myself as a pastor.
Oh, that is so interesting. Now, was that your plan to go to seminary and to get I'm assuming you got some kind of theology degree or ministerial degree?
Right. And then I have a Master of Divinity, so yes.
And then were you planning all the time to go to medical school, or did that come up after you achieved mastering the divine?
I'm not sure I mastered the divine, but no, yes, it was a big plan. It all came from the fact that I grew up reading the Bible. Couldn't help but noticing all the stuff in there about healing the sick. It's on every page. Yeah, right. A third of the New Testament has to do with healing the sick, but I would look around and see what my church did, and there wasn't much to it. We would pray for people on Sunday morning. A few people visited the shut-ins. The pastor was expected to visit people in the hospital, but that defined our healing ministry. It seemed to me that there ought to be more to it than that. We'd built large hospitals that have church names on them. They do good work. They had almost nothing to do with worshiping congregations. Oh, that's interesting. So were people at seminary surprised at that, or when you got into medical school, were people surprised that you had already earned a seminary degree? Really probably true on both accounts, and it's really a reflection to me about how far we in the church have gotten from what really is the call to a healing ministry. But our memories are so short. In this country, prior to the Civil War, if you were sick, the most likely person anybody would have seen for health care was a pastor. Pastors provided virtually all the health care in this country, and it's only been in the last 100 years that we've come to really follow Plato and Descartes more than Jesus and Paul. Oh,
I had never thought about it in those terms. That there's sort of a philosophical shift of faith being led off into knowledge and medicine being used as something that's really practical.
Yeah, really. I mean, it's both a philosophical and an economic issue. But philosophically, in the late 19th and early 20th century, there was a reassertion of Descartes and Plato's concept that you could take a human being and separate them into a body and a spirit. And we put the body on one side, say that's the purview of science and medicine. We put the spirit on the other, say it's okay for the church to mess around with your spirit, but heaven forbid it cross that line and care about our bodies. Yeah. On the financial side, during this exact same time period, there really developed a huge explosion in medical science and technology. We had new tools that we didn't have before. It was seen as financially lucrative, and there arose a new profession known as medicine. And at that point, the pastors were actually too lazy to keep up with all the new knowledge. And it made financial sense to keep the church out of the business of medicine. So these two things together led us to really, and then the third element of all this was the whole concept of the split between science and religion that comes about because of Darwin. Yeah. But those three things happen all at the same time and lead us to where we've come to think as Christians we relate to God from the neck up. Right. But that's not right. God gave us this body for a reason. We have an obligation to take care of it, and if you're going to be faithful, you got to figure out how am I engaged in caring for this body God's given us.
Well, that's a part of what I want to talk about, and I also think that it's interesting in your book that you want to talk about health care not in the form of, or not through the lens of how do we pay for it, which in, sort of the last 5 years in the United States, any phrase that begins with health care, people immediately start thinking health insurance. Right? Like it's just all the political battles, all of what states are worried about, all of what insurance companies do is really about the means by which we pay for health care. Right. But not enough people are doing what I think you're trying to do, and that is to raise the question and conversation about what do we mean by being healthy people and how would we accomplish that kind of health. Instead, it just sort of devolves into a conversation about how are we going to pay for it. And you've, and at your clinic, you deal with the uninsured all the time. So I know you're thinking about how people pay for it, but that's a sub category of really what is healthcare and how do people provide that for one another.
Right. My clinic in Memphis, which is called the Church Health Center, focuses entirely on caring for people who work in low-wage jobs who don't have health insurance. So paying for it through health insurance is really not an issue with them. That's really has given us a huge freedom to be able to rethink what does health really mean? What does it mean to be well? And what it absolutely doesn't mean is just the absence of disease.
Oh.
You know, nobody dies and puts on their tombstone, I wish I had gone to the doctor one more time. You know, we die. We die and want to spend more time with our grandkids, more time with those things that actually bring about joy and happiness in life, and that's what health ought to be about. Your doctor ought to be somebody who's not just focusing on the past in terms of looking for disease. I mean, yes, the doctor needs to do that, but the doctor also ought to be a partner in helping you figure out how do I live the life that gives me the fullness of life that God intended.
You know, that's so interesting because many of the people that I end up talking to, will say, look, there's a difference between health care and illness management. And so often that what people mean by health care is how do they manage an illness? But you're really talking about health care in the positive sense of that term, which is how do you live a healthy or whole or, I guess, obstacle-free kind of life to the outcomes that you want to have.
Right. I mean, healthcare in America, what we immediately turn to are charts that show us what the leading causes of death are. You know, shouldn't we be focused more on what are the leading causes of life? You know, what are those things that make life rich and full? If you're a 30-year-old man and you go to the doctor for an annual physical exam, you're just wasting your money. If you don't have any symptoms, the chances of that doctor finding anything wrong is almost zero. However, if what that doctor was focused on was to help you ask the question, how do I live a healthy life for the next 5 to 10 years? You know, now it would make a lot of sense to go to the doctor. But if all you're doing is asking for tests, and one of the things I say in the book and describe in great detail is that we have an unholy love affair with technology in this country. We've come to believe I can live my life absolutely any way I want to. And it won't be a problem because when my body breaks down, there'll be some technological advance that will put me back together and the doctor will be able to fix me. Well, the technology is not that good and the doctor is not that smart.
Now, the book is called Healthcare You Can Live With, and so is the website. So, folks, if you want to follow up on some of this now, it's a nice little website. There's tips and events and information about the book and a little video where you can see Dr. Morris talking about some of these ideas. That's also called Healthcare You Can Live With. And the book, you can buy it at all the places where you normally buy books, and you can go to Amazon or go to the Doug Pagitt Radio page, and we'll put a link for it there. Tell us what else is in the book. If someone's interested in this conversation and you've started to strike that sort of harmonious resonance in their minds, like, yeah, that's what I've been thinking about, or that sounds like what my friend says. Tell us a little bit more about what's in the book. How is it structured, and who's it best for?
Well, I think it's